Welcome, everyone. I am Fritz William H. Battlesmith, and I'm here to welcome you at our first course at the Retro Future Research Foundation, the first educational institution in arcology. And this is totally not some scam orchestrated by our great and generous benefactor. Anyway, officially, we like to explore strange new worlds and histories that never happened. At least that is what our marketing department wants me to say. For our first lecture, we originally intended to do a history on Frostpunk. However, it turns out they're working on new content for this great city builder, including a prequel. So, we need to shelve that for a while. Instead, we are going to explore a world I wanted to talk about since I started working for this benefactors at Radio Retro Future. So, the world we're going to be talking about today is Prester, the world of the Last Exile series. The Last Exile was an anniversary project by Gonzo, an anime studio of mixed reputation. But Last Exile was one of those first anime series that combined hand-drawn art with non-photorealistic rendering. And it looks bloody amazing, even for today's standards. Now, Gonzo was about to celebrate its anniversary, so they wanted to make something special. They contacted a concept artist by the name of Ranj Murata, or however you pronounce it as. A man with a very unique style, something severely lacking in anime these days. They gave this man a week and an unlimited budget to design a brand new setting, and he made it something very damn unique in the process. He created a science fiction setting borrowing aesthetics from the interbellum period, 1950s sci-fi, Art Deco, Bauhaus, and chess. That's right, chess. So what is so special about the planet of Prester? Well, first of all, Prester is a hourglass-shaped planet. That's right, hourglass-shaped. Wrap your head around that, flat earthers. Anyway, its surface mostly consists south of mountain ranges and large bodies of water are practically non-existent. That means that all available water is either stored underground or hangs up in the air. Water is so uncommon it's practically currency, so you can forget about beer and other things that make life worth living. Right off the bat, this rock seems a pretty shitty place to live on. But there's something else. Something many viewers of our main channel might enjoy immensely. Claudia. Claudia is magical bullshit that makes other shit float. And does it float? In a world where traveling large distances over ground or sea is impossible, the entire logistical and economic system depends on big-ass ships that run on the blue stuff. However, Claudia properties only works when you add water. Yeah, the stuff that is already rare to begin with. And not just any water. It needs to be properly purified as well, leaving the majority of the population with the cheap, less purified variants to sustain themselves. You know the situation is pretty deplorable when people give each other purified water as birthday presents. We ain't done talking about Claudia and the airships. But we need to discuss the politics for a moment. I want to discuss the prelude that led to the crisis that ended the water shortage on Prester and turned this barren rock into a pretty okay place to live. And it all started with something pretty insignificant. A typical tale of two kingdoms. Desif and Anaturai. These were the only two nations on Prester, each separated by something called the Grand Stream. What is the Grand Stream, you ask? Well, imagine El Nino on crack cocaine, centered around the choke point between the two halves of the planet, literally separating the two nations. A permanent storm with winds that reach speeds up to 140 kilometers an hour. Now, this should have stopped any air fleets from attacking one another. But for some reason, the Disiv didn't get the memo and kept finding ways to move entire air fleets through the damn anomaly. So Anatarai kept sending out their fleets to stop them. Many many times. But the Disif just kept coming back. I guess it became so normal, the Enterai just didn't bother to ask why they would do so in the first place. This is the prelude to the third Battle of Minagith, or Minagis. But before we get started, we need to talk about these airships again. You see, Prester has developed a rather peculiar way of war during the time of the Two Kingdom period. Despite these battleships having enough guns to level a small city, they fight with Musketeers. And no, this is not some antiquated name for sci-fi soldiers or jet-powered rapier-wielding badasses. No, I mean actual Napoleon-style Musketeers. Many have criticized this for being, well, dumb. But allow me to explain a couple of things. Battles on Prester were fought with a strict code of conduct that is dictated by the Guild. Without going into their history, the Guild is a faction of transhumans responsible for overseeing human progress on the world of Prester. They don't get involved with its politics, but it does attempt to maintain a certain balance of power. They do this by providing both kingdoms with certain technologies, and ask little if nothing in return. In theory, at least. However, they're not idiots. Replicating their technology is forbidden, and they guard all existing engines that keep the huge battleships afloat. But how do you stop human monkeys from fiddling with your machines? Actually, their solution is quite genius. The Guild effectively have their own ships inside each battleship of either nation. That makes them ejectable power systems, called Claudia units. These units power and manage the engines. If a ship would take damage, or the crew would do something foolish like trying to take the unit by force, the Guild members can simply eject the entire pod and fly off, while the crew falls screaming to its doom. One final technical detail about the Claudia units. One of the reasons these units produce more power than common Claudia engines is because these use alcohol instead of water. It's the Guild's way of saying, screw you, you can't have nice things. It is just as terrible as it sounds, but there are more problems. You see, battleships tend to shoot at each other. You can imagine Guild members don't like getting shot at, especially in wars in which they have literally nothing to gain. So the Guild has made up all these rules on how airships are allowed to engage each other and to stop their own people from getting killed in combat. Now don't get me wrong, still plenty of units get destroyed in this way. But be sure that the Guild will take any opportunity to minimize their own casualties. So, every time the Disib and the Enterai come together for a mutual bullets exchange, a Guild arbiter ship must be present to see if they're killing each other according to the rules. And the thing with authority is that humans grow accustomed to it, and get confused when the authorities don't act on the laws they themselves brought into being. So much so that the Enterai nation made it part of their military culture and codified it with their own type of chivalry. This chivalry takes into account that the Guild acts as sport arbiters during their battles, as if it were common sports tournaments. And of course, the Guild arbiters are keeping the score. That is why all these battleships have collapsible decks, where Napoleon-style musketeers with hydraulic muskets form up firing lines and start shooting each other in the sky. Only if enough musketeers have died and the losing party refuses to back down, only then the arbiters allow both parties to fire the big guns at each other, with the caveat that the units inside the ships are allowed to leave at any time they damn well please. It's a weird way to wage war, but it makes sense from the Guild's perspective. This has affected the entire social structure of the Enterai kingdom, whose social elite comprises the military. This includes the musketeers, who have a good chance to die on some deck in one of the most unspectacular ways you could possibly imagine. It is said that the survival rate for a Musketeer's tour of duty is about 30%. At least you get to live a life in relative comfort. Now with all that out of the way, let's dig into the third battle of Minagis. Now, Minagis is not that important. It's a border province of Anaterai close to the Grand Stream. Once again, a decisive fleet of 15 Reparation-class battleships appeared from the stream under the command of Nestor Messina. A Anaterai fleet under the command of David Matt Fane would face him with 22 Calypsolus-class battleships. It was strange for the Disif to arrive with such a relative small force, but the Anateraian commanders assumed they might have suffered losses in the Grand Stream and didn't want to lose face by fleeing the battle. For honor and chivalry and all that stuff. A guild arbiter arrived to oversee the fleet's conduct and agreed with this engagement, and so it began. Both sides lined up their broadsides and lowered their musketeer decks. Right away, the Anateride infantry unleashed their fury upon their foe with deadly precision. The Disif, however, struggled to maintain a proper rate of fire, and their ranks would be devastated as a result. In a matter of moments, the outcome of the duel was crystal clear, but the Disif commanders refused to acknowledge defeat, and both sides agreed to an artillery exchange. But again, the superiority of the Anateride gun crews prevailed. Soon, the Anaterai fleet managed to take out a number of the Disif vessels without taking any losses of their own. When the guns ceased, the outcome of the battle seemed very clear. However, when the Anaterai were celebrating their victory, what they didn't know was what had taken place in the kingdom of Disif. Disif had been going downhill for a while now. For reasons beyond their control, the Grand Stream started to block out the sun above the nation, causing crops to fail and the land to snow over. The fleet wasn't just some invasion, it was a vanguard of an entire exodus. Behind the battleships there was an entire fleet of improvised refugee vessels, filled to the brim with families fleeing the Ice Age with whatever supplies they could muster. Many of these rockets would get torn to shreds by the Grand Stream or just crash in the middle of the barren mountains and deserts to die. If the Disif could have won this battle by maintaining the code of chivalry, they would. And they trained every available body so they could. The Disif even armed their own women with smaller-sized muskets so they could participate, but these civil militias were no match for the Anaterai Musketeers who were literally bred and raised for this type of war. But make no mistake, these men and women knew what they were in for. As the battle raged, the Disif command received the casualty numbers. Even according to their most positive estimates, everything pointed to an inevitable outcome. The Anaterai command contacted them, asking for their surrender as the code dictates. But to the Disif, this was unacceptable. Chivalry or not, Messina had not taken any chances. Instead of deploying the full force of the Disif navy, the Disif would deploy only 15 ships with inexperienced volunteers who had nothing to lose. They knew they didn't stand a chance. These volunteers were just bait so the Anaterai would not respond with their full force. Meanwhile, twice the number of Reparation-class battleships were still in the Grand Stream, waiting, while winds reaching speeds up to 144 kilometers an hour were tearing at their hulls. But then finally, the signal was given. To the horror of the Anaterai fleet, the unthinkable happened. From the Grand Stream above, a new Disif fleet appeared. The Disif deck guns took aim and fired at their enemies. And this wasn't just some volley of shells. This was the rejection of centuries of decency and tradition. It was the end of chivalry and the beginning of a new type of war. Total war. The Anateraian command froze as ships succumbed to the hail of fire. Guild units ejected, leaving their host ships and their crews to fall from the sky to their inevitable demise. Requests to the guild arbitership were sent, but all the response they got was silence. Well, the guild ship was more than happy to receive all the ejected Claudia units that had abandoned ship and left their crews to die. After this turn of the tide of battle, the Anatorai Fleet Command hesitated on how to respond. Several captains refused to let this tragedy slide and ordered their gun crews to return fire. These vessels would soon succumb to a hail of shells. I think it is fair to say that at this point, it's very obvious that the Anatorai had lost this one. Now, what happens next is a bit unclear. Matt Fane, unlike his name would imply, he was not a fool, and he knew he was outmaneuvered. This was so unlike any battle he had ever fought. He knew he couldn't conceive of a new proper strategy in time for it to matter, but he also was no coward, and if anything, a military man such as himself was deemed to fight to the death in situations like this, just as the code required him to. Now, the stories of those on board of the Clem Solus differ somewhat. It is assumed by most that Matt Fane knew right away he needed to abandon the code of chivalry and prepare for total war. But there is a somewhat more whimsical tale told by some veterans. You see, right after the Anatorai fleet declared victory for itself, there was a courier van ship that came aboard. Van ships are the only flying vessels both kingdoms can produce without help of the guild. These vehicles are mostly used for delivering letters and performing all other types of errands. And it just so happened that one of these small craft landed on his flagship to hand-deliver a letter from his wife and daughter. Some say Matt Fane took the time to read the delivered letter, expecting he was about to die. Others claim the message was read out loud by a young woman, or man, depending on who you ask, over the ship's announcement system, rumored to be one of the van ship pilots. Whatever happened, the officers looked on Matt Fane as he raced from his seat, expecting the order to engage the enemy. But he astounded the entire officer corps when he announced a full retreat. I think it is worthwhile to mention that his fleet was reduced to 11 out of the 22 ships at this point. This was not a popular decision, to say the least, but his order was executed regardless. During the retreat, his flagship, the Clem Solus, would cover the rear as the Disif ships moved in for the kill. In a last-ditch effort, the van ships attempted to obfuscate the flagship by releasing a smoke screen. It was effective, but not enough. They needed nothing short of a miracle at this point. And that miracle came in the shape of a single airship. Its arrival was announced by a bright red military-type van ship piloted by a very deadly pilot that managed to down one of the Exile battleships with a very well-placed bomb. But that was just a taste from what emerged from the clouds. A vessel of war that invoked fear and disgust in many a captain's heart. It was the Anatolian Sylvana, or Silvervana. Again, not entirely clear. Anyway, we'll talk about the Sylvana and its captain next time. For now, let's just say this ship is capable of kicking various types of aft because of its unique design, possible implementation of lost tech, and its notorious captain. Unlike the Clem Solus class, it was designed and built for total war, and its captain was chosen for not giving a damn about honor or other pleasantries. Anyway, due to the intervention of the Sylvana and its vanships, what remained of Matt Fane's fleet managed to escape, evading complete annihilation. And that is the story of the third battle of Minagis. In the aftermath, Minagis fell to the Disif invaders, and cities like Nokia were all but defenseless. But for the Disif, this was not over. The next stage was to prepare the province to receive the countless refugees. If Messina would make one single mistake, this could spell the end for his people. As for the Anaterai, it was a painful lesson in a new type of war. The Disiv had always been enemies, but there was honor to their ways. Now they were nothing more than vile invaders who had no honor or decency. What they did was nothing short of betrayal, and there was only one way to deal with traitors. As for the guild, well, something was off about the guild for a while now, and both sides might have expected something like this to happen. So, no love was lost between the three parties. As a matter of fact, it might have been just the excuse all sides were waiting for to start a war against the guild. But Commander Matt Fane was not concerned with that for the moment. He knew the Anaterai fleet needed to adapt, and quickly. The claimed Solus-class ships were developed for only one type of war. These ships were nothing but armored musketeer carriers with guns fitted on the top to fire at Disiv ships that descended from the grand stream above. Of course, this could not last. But what did the future of aerial combat look like? Well, one peculiar scene would inspire Matt Fane's future strategies and doctrines. During the retreat, as he looked out of the window of the claimed Solus, he saw a lone carrier-class vanship evading a hail of enemy fire. This peculiar vanship would go down in the history as the spirit of the Grand Stream for, well, other feats. But for now, it would give Matt Fane the idea on how to prepare for the battles to come. And with that, I want to end today's lecture. I hope you found this interesting, and I hope to see you all back when we continue our talk. But before you leave, here are a few announcements. A thank you to the people who are maintaining the Last Exile wiki. It was a very helpful resource during the creation of this video. Also, if you enjoyed the background music of this video, this was music from the original soundtrack of Last Exile, created by Doyle's Triade. Go check out his work, it's bloody amazing. Next up, this video took many hours and many pots of coffee to create. So we would appreciate it if you could fuel our endeavors by having a look at our Subscribestar or Patreon page. I want to use this opportunity to thank the people who already support us: JGB Spender, Steamy Wonders, and Bowlerhead Tom. Thank you guys so much for your support. Now, if you want to help us lighten the workload, we are also looking for researchers and writers, and people who want to help create assets for our videos. So if you feel passionate about certain media or topics and you want to help promote it, please leave us a message in the comment section. This was Fritz William H. Battlesmith, and I thank you for your consideration.